Hi, it's Allison, and I'm going to do the coronavirus tag that I originally saw. It was posted by Steve Donoghue, and I thought it was a really cool idea and probably inevitable. And I was really happy that I was tagged by Scallydandling about the books. So here is my response to the coronavirus tag. And I'm going to get right into the questions because I think they're pretty cool and they're pretty timely. Number one, a misleading initial report, a book that turned out to be very different than you first heard of it and not necessarily worse. So for me, I'm going to choose A Dirty Job by Christopher Moore. It was the first book by Christopher Moore that I had ever read. And I think I chose to read it probably around Halloween time. I was looking for a spooky read. Not necessarily spooky, but something supernatural, just a seasonal sort of read. And I picked that up not realizing, I don't think, just how funny his books are. And since then, I've read a few more of his books. I read the sequel to A Dirty Job, which is called Secondhand Souls. And I read, just this past summer, I read The Gospel According to Biff, Christ's Childhood Pal. His books are just hilarious, and I look forward to reading more and more of them. But that's definitely a book that was not what I expected. So number two, Harsh Containment Measures, a book of one type that's impossible to hand a reader of other types. Bonus points if you've actually tried. Well, I've tried. My book club can definitely attest to that. And one, I've tried many times. One such book would be The Dinner by Herman Koch. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And so I loved that book. It's an unusual format if you've never heard of it. The entire book takes place over the course of one evening, with two couples coming together and eating at a fancy restaurant. And it's over the course of like the appetizer and the entree and the dessert and more fancy courses. And it is very dark, and there's a lot of reflection by one of the characters, but I just really, really liked it. I thought it really liked the way it was done. And so I convinced my book club that we should read it as a group. And most of them were not fans. And that's certainly, it probably wasn't the first time I did that, and it hasn't been the last, but that's one example that immediately came to mind. So number three, Intense Communicability, a book that will work its magic on anybody. So for this book, I have another book that I read and convinced my book club that we should read it together. But this one, I knew it had that special something that I think most people would enjoy. And that's Only Child by Rhiannon Naveen. This book, I don't want to give too much away, but it's told from the point of view of first grader Zach Taylor. And while he's at school one day, there is a school shooting, and the book is told from his point of view in the aftermath of that school shooting. And it will tear your heart out. It really will, if you have one. Number four, Serious Mortality Rate, a book with a significantly noticeable body count. I didn't think too hard about the choices for this. So my first gut reaction was the Game of Thrones series, A Song of Ice and Fire, which if you haven't read the books, you've likely watched the TV series. And we all know that there's plenty of deaths, a lot. And I am really looking forward to the last books in that series. Should they get published anytime soon? Not holding our breaths for that, are we? Number five, Quarantine Prep. 5 books or series you'd want with you under house confinement. To choose these books, I didn't put too much thought in it. I just stood in front of my books and looked at the ones I haven't read, and I just grabbed 5 that I haven't read before that I really, really would like to read. They've been ones that have been on my list for a long time. So I picked The Time Traveler's Wife, which and maybe one of the last people on earth who hasn't read this book, but I haven't read it and I keep meaning to read it. And so that's book number 1. Love in the Time of Cholera. And I didn't pick this book because there are probably people getting sick and dying in it. I don't know because I haven't read it. But it's just one that's supposed to be really good and I haven't read it yet. So that's book number 2. Book number 3, Girl with a Pearl Earring. Same thing. I've wanted to read this book for I don't know how long. I don't know why I haven't read it yet. So I grabbed it. The Secret The Secret Scripture by Sebastian Barry. And same thing. It's just one I really want to read. And I haven't read it. And I took The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. And those are my 5 books that I would want in quarantine with me. And number 6, Repeat Infection. A book that was even more effective on you the second time around. So this is a really easy one for me right now because not that long ago, I reread The Old Man and the Sea, which I had read previously in high school. And it was required reading. And being the teenager that I was, I hated it. And I didn't understand why I was reading a book about a man floating around in a boat chasing a fish. And that was as much as I understood it, or as much as I let myself understand it, probably is more likely. But I reread it not that long ago, and it really blew me away how just what a wonderful writer, I guess, that Ernest Hemingway was. And I've since read another one of his books, The Sun Also Rises, which that one I didn't feel as strongly about, and I wonder if that's more a generational thing. I think that book may have been more timely to the time when it was published and the generation for which it was published. But The Old Man and the Sea, on my second read, I was quite impressed. Not gonna lie. Probably because I hated it so much when I read it when I was 16. And number 7, effective prevention. What are some of the ways you prevent bookish infection when you've read a couple of lousy books in a row and want to turn it around, etc.? So what I usually do then, if I'm in a reading slump, I will read something just really fun. There's no other purpose in the book, really, just a fun romp. I could even pick up middle grade fiction. I could resort to rereading something I've read before that's just a nice cup of tea, so to speak. I could resort to romance, YA fantasy, but just something lighter that's just fun, and it makes me forget that I was ever in a reading slump to begin with. So that's my coronavirus tag, and I think it was a really cool idea. And it was probably inevitable as well that somebody would create this tag. So there you have it. Thanks for watching Allison Hikes the Bookwoods.